Hello guys, Almatrust here, just coming at you with the second video in our Rust programming series, and in this video I'm just going to teach you about variables. So I've decided to split variables and data types into two separate videos because variables sort of need a bit more of an explanation compared with other languages if I was teaching them, but yeah, let's just get straight into it. So first of all, I'll just create a new cargo project called variables. I obviously taught you how to do that in the last video, and we'll just cd into it. So if we go and open this file, to declare a variable in Rust, we just use the let keyword. So basically this will tell Rust that we're declaring a variable now. Then we say what the variable name is, so for example x, and then we set this equal to a value, whatever value we want. So this could be, a string, this could be a number, whatever. We'll just make it a number for now. So now that we have this, for anyone that hasn't programmed before, this basically means store this value in memory and let us reference that memory using this keyword x. So if we ever want to reference, this number that we've stored in the future, which is stored in memory, then we use x to say that. So if we want to print this out now, we use our print line macro, and we just say the value of x equals, and we use these curly braces. So these curly braces are basically like a placeholder in this string for inserting certain values into. So for example, in this case, if we pass in x, this second parameter here, this will pass in this value into this print line statement. So if we come in here, cargo run again, then as you can see, we get the value of the variable. So obviously, if you've programmed in any other language before, you will probably just say, okay, well, to change the variable, we just come in here and we change it to something else. So if we try to compile this now, as you can see, it does not compile because we're assigning to an immutable variable. So basically, by default in Rust, whenever you declare a variable like this, it is completely immutable. In other words, we cannot change this variable. This is basically just like fixed then for the lifetime of it. We cannot change this variable's value, which obviously is slightly confusing for people coming from other languages. But to be able to change it, we just need to explicitly say to the compiler, we plan to change this in future. This is not going to be, like constant for the rest of the lifetime of this. We want to change this. So we mark it with mute to say that we want to change this in future. And as you can see, now this compiles successfully and we're able to change it. So obviously, if you come from other languages, you'll basically say, okay, well, this is exactly the same as a const then. But a const is slightly different. And if I show you a const, we type in const x, and then let's just set it equal to the same thing. And if we try to, well, we'll just print it out first, just so it's not dead code. And yeah, let's just try and compile this. As you can see, we need to specify the type of a const, which we don't need to do here. In this case, the compiler works out the type. In this case, we need to explicitly tell it what the type is. So I'm just going to go with an unsigned 8-bit integer because this is a small number. And if we run this now, as you can see, this is the const value right here. So what's the difference? Basically, the difference is this needs to be known at compile time. So in other words, constant expression. So basically, we couldn't like have a function up here and return a value from the function and assign it to this const. We can't like determine what this is during runtime. This has to be a compile time thing. If you don't understand what that means, it's just basically this just needs to be a constant value we assign to this. So there's one more thing to sort of point out before we move on. There is another way to do this. So say this wasn't marked as mute. What we're then able to do is we're able to type in, again, let x equals 10. Now this will work, as you can see here, but this is slightly different from the mutable thing that we did before. When we did the mutable thing, we were actually reassigning the variable. So in other words, we're like overwriting what that memory was with our new memory, like that. Whereas now, we're actually declaring an entirely new variable. So this is basically, this variable just gets deleted, and this is an entirely new variable, which happens to have the same name, but this is an entirely new variable. So you might be wondering what the point of that is, but I think the Rust documentation gave a very good example for this. So for example, if we were getting some user input, so for example, let's spaces, and we were to say to the user, okay, well, insert a number of different, insert how many spaces you want, and we will tell you how many spaces you inserted. Not very useful, but we'll just do it with the example. So for example, then here, if we tried to do, like if this was mutable, and we tried to do spaces equals spaces.len, which is for length, and then we printed this out, should have saved that statement. The number of spaces is, and then we passed in the number of spaces. If we try to do that, if you know from some other languages, you obviously cannot reassign like a variable with a different type. So this is this is designated as a string type. So obviously we're trying to change this to an integer value, but obviously we cannot do that because the memory reserved for this is different from an integer. We cannot just assign an integer to a string type. So how do we do this then? So if we get rid of mute and we just type in let again, which is shadowing this variable, as I told you before, this is creating an entirely new variable. So it's irrelevant whether this is a string or whatever it is. We're just completely assigning a new variable now and deleting this one. So this will work. Now you might be wondering what the advantage of this is. Well, basically the advantage is that we don't need to use two variable names for this. So it's very easy to see here, oh, spaces, that's the spaces the user entered. Then we have spaces, oh, that's the number of spaces. And we just use this one keyword, spaces. Whereas, if we were to do this another way, spaces underscore str, and then spaces underscore num is equal to this, and then we have this in here. It's just slightly harder to read and not as sort of concise as you can see that it's exactly the same thing, but this just basically makes it for like much easier reading and just like much easier programming in general. So that's pretty much all there is to know about variables. We'll be going over data types in the next video, so I'll see you then.